A voice actor's job is to embody the branding of the company. A voice actor who does work for Nike is going to sound different than a voiceover that works for Memorial Hospital. Like they're going to sound different. The voice type is going to be completely different. And that's as it should be. The brand should be thinking about that. What can voice actors do? They can be as trained and coached as possible to understand what the current trends are. And the current trends, as far as I can see right now, is ownership. It's owning what you're speaking. It's being confident and, this is how it is. You could take it or leave it, up to you. But this is how I believe, and that's it. And a lot of brands are going in that direction.
Welcome to the latest edition of Adeptus On-Air, and today we have a special guest in Jodi Krangle. She is a voice actor since 2007 and has worked with major brands both nationally and internationally. So, Jodi, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks so much for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So I see that you are big on the term of audio branding.
Yes.
Can you just explain to the audience and myself what that means in your definition?
Well, audio branding, also called sonic branding, so a lot of people might see it as that instead. It's a big umbrella of all of the sounds that represent your brand. So that could be anything from like a 3-note mnemonic that you play at the end of every video, or it could be something that happens when, let's say, your GE kettle is finished boiling, or the UX sounds in a Windows machine, or something like even a game, like video games have UX sounds, right? So they have like sounds that happen every time you use the menu. Pardon me. And so there are all sorts of little sounds that make up a brand. And the big umbrella that they're under is audio branding or sonic branding.
That's awesome. And how did you get into the sound industry, the voice industry? It's not something that's as kids is necessarily talked about. And people say they want to be firemen and firefighters and even actors and actresses and things of that nature. So how did you land into that industry, and when did you realize you could be a success at it?
Oh, lots of questions there, kind of multifaceted. I will say that the very first exposure I had to voiceover as a thing was when I volunteered my time at the CNIB, which is the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. I'm north of Toronto, Canada. And so that's where I got my first experience. And at that time, I was reading magazine articles onto reel-to-reel tape.
Oh, wow.
And because we were volunteering our time, they were both having us read the articles and also operate the reel-to-reel tape. So I was sort of getting my fingers into both the voicing and the tech at the same time. And I liked all of it. I just thought it was really fascinating. When I decided to make the jump was 2007. And before that, I'd been doing SEO and internet marketing. So I've been on the internet since 95. And I had a songwriting website started in 95 that was a resource on the web for like right up until 2016, actually. But I learned a lot through having that website because I had no money to promote it. And I understood eventually how to promote that website. And understanding that, I was able to do that for clients. So I was doing that for clients for a while. And then in 2007, when Google was it, there were no search engines other than Google left that mattered. I got really bored. And I tend to do things when I get bored. Things happen. So I thought of this little thought that had been percolating in the back of my head about voiceover. And, I've been singing all my life. So my voice has been always a part of everything that I do. And I just thought maybe now is the time. And so I knew about websites. I just made myself a website and off I was going. Yeah. But I had to learn that there was a lot more involved than just putting up a website and saying, here I am, world, come find me. Beyond the fact that I desperately needed coaching, Because you don't just set up a storefront and say, I'm going to do this without any training.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't understand what that training should be at the time. I needed to have that, you know, told to me multiple times, sometimes not so nicely. But, you know, we all make mistakes when we start a new profession, right? Like there's always going to be mistakes. My mistake was thinking that I could go to a demo mill, which is basically someone that will take your credit card and just make a demo for you, and they don't care whether you know what to do with it or not, or whether you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I was focused on copying the people I thought sounded like voiceover people. That's what I was stuck in because I had had no coaching. And after I got those demos made, put it up on a message board because in 2008, there was no social media to speak of. So message boards were the thing. I put it up on a message board and said, "Oh, isn't this great? Doesn't it sound fantastic?" And they were like, "Well, no, actually, it doesn't sound fantastic. And here's why." The person who was the most vocal about that, after being a little butthurt for a while and, you know, licking my wounds, private messaged him on the message board and said, "I don't know what I did wrong. Help." What do I do? I spent all this money on these demos and they're apparently digital doorsteps now. I don't know what to do with them. And he very kindly took me under his wing and we practiced and back and forth, just sending MP3s. He would send me scripts and I'd act because I had no acting experience. That was not what I'd been taught. I'm a musician, so I knew how to perform on a stage. And that's sort of acting. It's inhabiting what you're singing, but it's not really acting. Like it's not understanding a script and interpreting it in multiple ways and then being directionable. Because part of what I do is being directed by clients to be the way that they heard in their head. Yeah. And to be myself. Like that takes coaching. It's not just speaking into a microphone. So yeah, I thought I had an aptitude for it when I even started it, but I didn't know how much I needed to know until I started taking coaching. Because, wow, you need to know a lot. Yeah. And the trends change all the time. Like between 2008 and now, oh my God, it's so different.
Yeah, wow, that's very multi-layered, and you answered part of my next question with it, but I guess I can get you to elaborate.
Sure.
You know, we hear voiceovers all the time and on radio, online, movies, things like that. Now, knowing the knowledge that you have, what makes a good voiceover or a successful voiceover, you know, in your opinion? What are clients looking for and what works in 2025?
I think that clients should be paying attention to their own brand's audio brand, which is why I talk about that. So the reason I started this podcast was because I, as a voice actor, was often the last person people were calling in. And I didn't think that should be the case because if you're not paying attention to how you sound, you're not completing that branding package. You're not giving people something to know, like, and trust, which is how you make sales, right? Yep. So for me, a voice actor's job is to embody the branding of the company, to be that voice that matches the brand of the company and who they're trying to reach. So, you know, you're going to have someone who, a voice actor who does work for Nike is going to sound different than a voiceover that works for Memorial Hospital. Like they're going to sound different. The voice type is going to be completely different. And that's as it should be. The brand should be thinking about that. So what can voice actors do? They can be as trained and coached as possible to understand what the current trends are. And the current trends, as far as I can see right now, is ownership. It's owning what you're speaking. It's being confident and, you know, this is how it is. You could take it or leave it, up to you. But this is how I believe, and that's it. And a lot of brands are going in that direction. And previous to that, it used to be very raw and real and unput on, and they would say conversational, but I think what they meant was just don't act bad. Don't be a bad actor. We don't want to see the secret sauce. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, and then it becomes a matter of how much are you being yourself? And when you are yourself, people are hiring you to be you as opposed to just being the put on voice of whatever. And you match that branding. So, you being the sound of your voice, not necessarily who you are, like visually. It doesn't matter who you are visually.
Yeah, I get it.
But yeah. So there are, again, lots of facets to the whole business. And I think that right now people's BS-o-meters are so high, they can tell if you're putting on something. So just don't.
Yeah.
Like my voice is suited for some things and not for others. And I totally get that and understand that. And the market hires me for what they feel I'm good at.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. Very well explained. And you mentioned something interesting with the trend towards, ownership, take it or leave it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a societal movement as well that has kind of gotten into product, or why do you think that is the current trend? Or
I think it's a society thing. I definitely do. Yeah. Everyone's opinion is it. Like, you have an opinion. Well, okay, that's just the way the world is. Like, that's a lot of people's experience right now. And no one else can tell them differently. And, I'm not necessarily saying that's horrible, but because of that attitude, that's what comes into the zeitgeist of the commercials, right? Yeah. Like that's it. It always reflects the environment around us.
That makes sense. You've worked for major brands, Kraft, Dell computers. How do those opportunities come about? I'm sure people, that might be listening that's interested in this industry. That's top of the food chain, is, publicly traded companies, huge companies.
Sure.
How did you land those gigs, and how was it working those gigs?
Well, landing those gigs, generally the bigger ones come from agents. And I will say that agents are very interested in what your demos sound like. And they kind of want to make sure that you are able to make money before they even take you on. So have your own clients. If that's what you're wanting to do with your life, if voiceover is something you really want to get into, then you do need a demo because your clients need to know what you sound like before they hire you. And you also need to be having your own regular clients because you're not going to make a living from one-offs every once in a while. That's not how it works. You need clients that come to you again and again and know that you're their go-to person for voice. And you need multiple of them because if you don't have multiple of them, you're idle most of the time.
Yeah.
So you need to be constantly priming that pump, which means marketing is definitely a thing, as for any entrepreneur. Right? You are a solopreneur. That's what you have to assume this is a business. It is an art, but it is mostly a business.
Yeah.
Because if you're not treating this like a business, you're not going to be able to keep your lights on. That's basic economy right there.
Yeah.
But basic economy also says that those agents want to know that you can make money on your own because then you're likely to make money for them and they're not going to hire people who don't make them money.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And it's more of a partnership. It's not really a hiring. They are part of your team and you are part of their team. And, they generally make a much lower percentage of the job than you do, 10 to 20%, let's say. Yeah. And, but they have access to the much larger jobs out there from the big companies like Dell and Kraft. And I've worked with Lindt and Lindt chocolate, which was lots of fun. And FedEx and other clients like this, you're likely to not see those just drop into your inbox from a client that isn't going through an agency, because a lot of these big companies have agencies that they're associated with, and then they go through that agency to the talent agent, and then sometimes through a casting director. So it depends on if there's someone in between.
Okay.
Yeah, there's like a lot of, like I said, lots of facets.
Yeah.
But there are also directories that you can be listed in that will then send you auditions, and you audition. And if you win the job, then you do that job. There are ways to do this, that there are many different ways to do this, but agents generally have the access to the big jobs. Yeah.
Makes sense. I understand that. What are some of your favorite assignments? Not necessarily in particular brands or anything, but do you like high energy assignments? Do you like kind of low key, somewhere in between? What are some of your favorite voiceover assignments?
Well, my wheelhouse tends to be healthcare. I do a lot of healthcare. I love travel and tourism. That whole, breathless wonder. I love that. I love doing that. They're just so much fun. And I do a lot of charities and nonprofits as well. So Operation Smile is one that I just did a project with, and hopefully we'll do more. And in fact, they were on my podcast during Podcast-thon, which I think is a podcast initiative about charities specifically. And Operation Smile gives operations to kids in needed areas who have cleft palate or other, birth problems that happen around the mouth, basically. That's why they're called Operation Smile. And it's just such a worthy cause. And I love helping that kind of thing. I've done stuff for the YMCA in the past, and, getting kids off the street and, that kind of stuff. Like that's a calling. Like, you got to love that.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of tech and a lot of finance, and my voice lends itself to a certain type of thing because it's pretty refined as opposed to raw, I guess. Mm-hmm. And, unfortunately that can work against me in some cases because it's really hard for me to like slur my words or to be to sound less formal, I guess. Yeah. So yeah. I can do it, and I'm talking to you in the way that I would normally just talk to a person, but my just talking to you as a person comes off differently than, say, someone else's. Yep. So I know where I fit and I know where I don't, and that's totally fine. The market has told me where I fit.
Yeah, and that's part of being a good, entrepreneur too, is knowing your market and
know your strengths.
Yeah. Exactly. Now that makes sense. I want to ask you about AI. Usually, AI is something that can potentially disrupt every sector, every guest that I interview, including our industry as well.
I talk about it a lot on my podcast too. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. So it's right in your wheelhouse.
Oh yeah.
give us the macro view, and then you can break it down micro, however you choose to do it. But where do you see AI in the grand scheme of the voiceover industry? And whatever direction you want to go with that question.
Yeah, well, I think it's scaring a lot of people, and I think in some instances it can replace us. But in others, for instance, audio branding is such a specialized thing. So the commercial and the corporate narration and all of that stuff that comes under the audio branding umbrella, I just don't see it being replaced by AI because we need that human-to-human connection. And if you're selling to AI, sure, use AI. But if you're selling to human beings, you need to use a human being for your audio.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it depends. And there's a backlash too. Like if you use AI for a commercial and then you don't tell people and then they find out later, that's going to not reflect well on your company.
Yeah.
And the people who are using AI voices on, YouTube to sell this thing or sell that thing, everyone who's listening to those knows how cheap those products are and how little attention they're paying to selling those products. It's like spam. If you send out 1 million pieces of spam, you're going to get 2 people that respond, right?
Yeah.
That's why they keep doing it.
Yeah.
So am I afraid of AI? No, I think it has its place and it's very good for productivity, but it's not good for connectivity. It's not good for connecting us. So I don't think that it's going to replace what I do, because the people who are using AI for their advertising right now, they never would have hired me in the first place.
Yeah, good point.
I'm not
Yeah,
worried about them.
yeah, very, very good point. That makes sense too. Your music, you delved into jazz, you delved into, other aspects of music.
Hmm.
Just talk about that a little bit, and then also the differences. I think you mentioned your singing voice and your voiceover voice, things like that. Are they parallel? Are they completely different lanes, or
Uh,
what's your thoughts?
well, the acting is different. I will say that. Embodying a song on a stage is different than embodying a script when you're talking to a client.
Hmm.
Uh, I have to be infinitely moldable when I am talking to a client, because I can start in one place that I think is perfectly reasonable, and then they have something completely different in mind, and all the rehearsing or whatever I did is out the window, and I just have to go with the flow. So I have to be able to change my direction on a dime. That's something that comes with experience. It's almost not even acting.
Yeah, yeah,
um, just to know what they mean by, I'd like more smile in this, or I want more energy. If they say more energy, technically what they mean is more smile. If I just put a smile on my face, it sounds more energetic, right?
yeah, yeah,
Or, there are other ways that people use words that mean many different things. And I need to interpret what those many different things, what one thing that means to the client, when they say this thing that could mean many different things. When it comes to performing on stage and music, I'm making my own interpretation, and people can take it or leave it, right?
yeah, yeah. You kind of are the master of your own
Yeah,
ceremony here, and
you're right out there. You're putting it out. You're putting it out there and letting people decide whether they like it or not, and that's it. There's no going back from that, especially in a live performance. I think it has helped me a lot, because a script still has a rhythm and a cadence and a song. A script has a song to it. There is interpretation. There are measures. There are different ways that sections of that script can be interpreted and spoken. And there are notes and beats to a script. Even though I'm needing to be infinitely directable, I can interpret where that might go in order to keep it from being boring.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So, and there's definitely a rhythm to a commercial script. And it depends on whether you're talking about a radio script or a TV script, because a radio script is wall to wall text, right? You're
yeah.
speaking the whole thing, and you're putting in the mind of the listener that theater of the mind.
Yeah.
You're
Almost
responsible
like,
for that. And the
yeah,
people who make the radio spot are putting the sound direction and whatever sound design on it to make it a theater of the mind thing. But when you're talking about TV or anything with video, I'm the voice under. I'm not the voiceover. I'm emphasizing things. And my script could look more like a haiku than it than it actually looks like a full wall-to-wall paragraph,
yeah,
I may be speaking way less words, but those words may be more impactful. So there's so many ways to interpret this. And again, the musicality helps a lot, but I think that there are different types of people who can do really well in voiceover no matter what their background is. So mine is music, but someone else who was a radio DJ may be able to improv off the cuff really easily. And because that's how they had to live their life for however
yeah,
many years they were on radio, right? So they may have to train their voice to be a little different, but the inherent idea of how to improv and how to be in the moment and get things done that way is already part of their makeup. And I don't have that. So, someone who used to be a pharmaceutical salesperson knows how to pronounce all of the drug names. Oh my God.
yeah,
Right? So that person is really well suited to do medical narration or medical ads or anything like that need any kind of pronunciation on strange drug names, right?
yeah.
So everyone has their background that would really lend itself well to voiceover.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm curious about the scripts. You mentioned the scripts. Um, is the range of quality all over the place, or are most like, I guess, do you see a good script and it's like, wow, this is a really good script, very well written and lends to my, and some you're like, I gotta really kind of work with this to make it up to par, or like, is the range all over the place, or is most of it, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of asking a macro question about quality of scripts from a talent perspective,
It's
because I would
probably
assume
all
you don't
over the
have much
place.
control over what you receive,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I really don't. Yeah. It's probably all over the place. Yeah. I'm you know what? I unfortunately am starting to see more scripts written by AI, which
Oh wow,
doesn't do people any services. It really
yeah,
doesn't. But again, it depends on how big the company is and how many resources they can devote to what they're doing. And I understand the smaller companies needing to do what they do, however they can do it in order to get out some ads. I'm not going to poo poo on that. That's
yeah,
whatever they
their
want me to
business.
say. I have my ethical boundaries, but
Hmm.
beyond that, I'll make anything work.
Yeah. How do you know the difference when, like, how do you know, oh, this is probably written by AI and this is, like, what do you see some of the differences, like the telltale signs to
You
you?
know what? I think that as a human being and as a reader, I probably recognize better writing, and anyone who's a reader will recognize good writing. I,
Yeah.
I I don't think that's inherent to any one group of people.
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, I think we just, in your gut, you read something and it hits you emotionally, and you know how you can interpret that to make it hit even more emotionally, then that's a great script. Or
Yeah.
if it's really clever, sometimes people will write jokes that are just, laugh out loud. Oh my God, I get to speak this. Or they refer back to something in the beginning of the commercial that then ties it all together really nicely in a bow. And you're like, wow, that was really masterfully done.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of interpretations. And I always appreciate a good script. But, at the end of the day, this is advertising and branding and marketing, and everyone knows what that is.
Yeah.
you know,
Abs-
if you're just honest about it.
yeah. Nah, absolutely. Jody, where do you see, so you've, many years in, about 17, 18 years in,
Yeah, this
where,
is year 18.
where do you see, what are some of your goals for the next, say, 2 to 4 years? Um, just going forward, moving ahead in the business.
Well, I love doing travel and tourism, and I would love to do more of that. I also really like casino work. That is
Yeah.
a lot of fun. So, yeah, I mean, I stick to things that are 5 minutes of finished audio or less. That's kind of where my sweet spot is. So, commercials and corporate narration and branding voice. And I do intros to podcasts all the time,
Oh, nice.
that kind of thing. So, just more of the same. I just love it. I've always loved it. And that love has not lessened at all in 18 years.
That's awesome. That's a great sign that you picked the lane that you are meant to be in.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
where can the audience find your work, online, social channels?
Yeah, I
Uh,
am online on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook under just Jodi Krangle. You can find me there. It's Jodi. And I have my website, which is voiceoversandvocals.com. And the podcast is there too. It's called Audio Branding, where I talk about the power of sound and how it influences us. So, yeah.
Awesome. We'll have all that in the show notes, for us when the podcast airs. And Jody, thanks so much for sharing your insight and knowledge. Fun conversation and knowledgeable conversation. Things that I did not think about in terms of sound and voice, but I agree with you 100% with audio branding, how important that is for companies. So, Jody, thanks again for joining Adeptus On-Air. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for inviting me. This was fun.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus On-Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.